Thank you, Sasha. Once again, good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's MAPC council meeting. As we all can very much tell, we're meeting virtually, so we have a few formalities to go through. So to kick that off, actually, before I do that, reminder, please rename yourselves, if you haven't done so already, to your full name and your affiliation. So if you could just full name, town of, city of, or your ex officio or gubernatorial affiliation, that will help staff as they work to count and tally votes over the course of the meeting today. So if you could do that, I am going to turn it over to MAPC's General Counsel, Marjorie Weinberger, to formally call the roll to ascertain if we've achieved quorum. Marjorie.
Thank you, Adam. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to MAPC's meeting. I will be calling off the names of the roll this morning. I apologize in advance if I mispronounce anyone's name. If you do not hear your name called at the end of the call of the roll, please unmute and announce yourself so that we can include you. If I don't say your name, it's likely because you are present here, and I will not be calling those who are present. Thank you very much. We begin. The City of Beverly, Michael Cahill. City of Boston, Segun Adawu. Boston alternate, Diego Hueso. Cambridge, Melissa Peters. Cambridge alternate, Jeff Roberts. Chelsea, John DePriest. I believe you are present, Mr. DePriest. Gloucester, Greg Verga. Gloucester alternate, Greg Catamatori. Lynn, Danya Smith. Malden, Deborah Burke. Newton alternate, Zachary Lamel. Quincy alternate, James Fatses. Somerville alternate, Sarah Lewis. Waltham, Catherine Cagle. Woburn, Dan Orr. Acton, Christian Guichard. These are the towns. Arlington, Claire Ricker. Bedford, Sarah Stanton. Bolton, Valerie Otois. Foxborough alternate, Cindy Markowitz. Brookline alternate, Kara Bruton. Burlington alternate, Melissa Tintokalis. Danvers, Aaron Henry. Dedham alternate, John Sisson. Essex, Peter Phippen. Foxborough, Paige Duncan. Hanover, Anne Lee. Hanover alternate, Joseph Colangelo. Hopkinton, Amy Ritterbush. Ipswich alternate, William Paulitz. Lexington alternate, Sheila Page. Lincoln, Paula Vaughn. Linfield, Robert Dolan. Linfield alternate, Emily Cardamatori. Manchester, Christine Delizio. Marblehead, Steve Liverone. Marblehead alternate, Rebecca Curran Cutting. Maynard, Chris De Silva. Millis alternate, Nicole Riley. Norwell, Bruce Graham. Rockport, Harry Korsland. Rockport alternate, Tom Mickus. Saugus, Jeanette Fasano. Situate, James Boudreau. Stoughton, Deborah Roberts. Stowe, Jesse Stedman. Stowe alternate, Ellen Sturgis. Swampscott, Marzi Galazka. Swampscott alternate, Pete King. Topsfield, Kevin Hartunian. Topsfield alternate, Donna Rich. Wakefield, Erin Kokinda. Walpole alternate, Ashley Clark. Wellesley, Megan Jopp. Wenham, Margaret Hoffman. Westwood, Stephen Olenoff. Westwood alternate, William DeLay. Weymouth, Robert Headland. Weymouth alternate, Carl Edzo. Wilmington, Valerie Gingrich. Winchester, Brian Skesky. Winchester alternate, Diab Jerius. Rentham, Rachel Benson. Rentham alternate, Kevin Sweet. The ex officio designees are Kat Benesh, Betsy Taylor, Joelle Barrera, Louis Evangelidis, John Bichard, Jonathan Gulliver, Tiffany Chu, Henry Vitale, Sasha Franklin Hodge, Priscilla Rojas, David Moeller, Gina Fiandaca, and Courtney Rainey, Vandana Rao, Rebecca Tepper, Juan Vega, Yvonne Howe, Elaine Vanya, and Jennifer Maddox. Gubernatorials, William Tinty, Richard Pila, Robert Cohen, Samuel Wong, Daniel Garcia Decoto, Kelly Chun, Gina Martinez, Romani Sripada, Matilda McGee Tubb, Stephen Soleria, Jordan Gies, Jared Johnson, and Angie Yao. We are just shy of quorum. Mr. President, could you take us forward?
Absolutely. Thank you, Marjorie. Okay, so in the absence of quorum, we are going to fast forward a little bit through the agenda. And I am going to turn it over to, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna scroll through to where I need to be. I'm gonna turn it over to Lizzie Wyant, Deputy Director, who's going to present the Davidson Staff Achievement Award. So Lizzie, why don't you take it away?
Lizzie, before you do that, I apologize. We actually have one person joining by phone. Is it all right if I unmute them to make sure they're a council member, that they're registered?
Yeah, please do.
If you're joining by phone ending in 3018, I've just asked you to unmute yourself. You can press *6, and you should be able to unmute. Can you tell us your name, please, and if you're a council member?
I'm sorry, who did you ask for?
Hi, who is this?
Jeanette Pisano. My name was read on the roll call.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Jeanette.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you, Sasha. Okay, Lizzie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Although I realize I am not sure that Holly has joined us yet this morning. I was wondering if someone can check to see if she's here.
I'll take care of that.
Thank you.
Well, so I know we have.
Another celebratory item. So
Yes, I know we do have a couple other acknowledgements and celebrations to mention. So, Mark, why don't I ask you to address the one you wanted to address while we see if Holly is here.
sure. So I'm going to give a brief happy birthday, if I can, to Holly Anderson, who, as many people know, was our direct manager of procurement and also our operations manager at MAPC for many years. She conducted council relations, among other things. So Heidi is a person that lots of you know. Many of you know that Heidi has been struggling with some health issues over the past year. She remains part of the MAPC family, even though she's no longer a staff person at MAPC. And we all wanted to wish her a great happy birthday today. She was planning to be at the council meeting. A family emergency made it difficult for her to join. But I spoke with her this morning. She sounds very good and very strong. I know that on this Zoom, there's a lot of love for Heidi, built over many years. And so I still wanted to take this opportunity, because we can share the recording with her, to give her a big happy birthday and to let you all know that she's doing well. We also would like to celebrate our longest standing staff member. And to do that, I am going to turn it over to our Deputy Executive Director for Planning and Sustainability, Catherine Antos.
Thank you, Mark. And unfortunately, Martin Pillsbury, our longest serving staff member, is busy helping another community become more resilient. So he will be joining later, but I want to make sure that you are all aware now of the privilege that we have at MAPC for Martin's 40 years of service. When you work at and with MAPC, you have the privilege of working with many colleagues dedicating their career to advancing smart growth and regional collaboration. And this week marks a major anniversary of a cherished colleague who's really dedicated his career to the MAPC region, really redefines that. And I'm honored to recognize Martin Pillsbury, our Director of the Environment, for his 40 years working with MAPC. Throughout this time, he has led a team that has brought communities together to address all types of water resources, from supply to demand, to water quality. He's also worked tirelessly with his team to advance municipal vulnerability preparedness and prepare communities to minimize hazards through hazard mitigation plans. He's pioneered new ways of looking at flood resilience planning. So at the end of the day, our region is more sustainable and more resilient because of Martin's 40 years of service. And I want to say that his contributions don't just go to the environment department, who we affectionately refer to as the green team, but he is also a colleague who has never hesitated to share his expertise, his history, his contacts, his relationships with anyone else within MAPC. And as someone who joined the MAPC team this past year, I would say, I experienced that firsthand, just the privilege of working with Martin, what I'm able to learn from him. And I know that I am not alone in joining my colleagues in truly expressing gratitude for his 40 years of service and recognizing this important milestone. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And thank you, Mark. And congratulations to Martin and happy birthday to Heidi. So very nice to be able to celebrate a series of nice things this morning. So in the intervening period, I've learned that we have achieved quorum and that our honoree this year for the Davidson Award will be joining us at 10:30. So we're going to revert back to the business of the meeting. Thank you for your patience as we sort through this. The dance of quorum in person is challenging, even more challenging in these virtual settings. So again, thank you all for your patience. So to dive into the business, I have to go through some formalities and then we will start to address the business of the meeting. So this open meeting of the MAPC Council is being conducted remotely, consistent with Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022, which includes an extension until March 31st, 2023 of the remote meeting provisions of former Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, which suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The public may view the proceedings of this meeting live streamed at https://www.youtube.com/user/MAPC Metro Boston. For this meeting, the MAPC Council is convening its members by video conference via Zoom. Council members receive their login credentials when registering for the meeting. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that most council members are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you. The recording of this meeting and the caucuses will be posted to the MAPC website as soon as practicable. So now I'm going to cover some ground rules. We're turning to the first item on the business agenda, And before we do so, let me cover these rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. Please remember that your phone or computer should be muted unless you are asked to speak. Additionally, please also remember that we'll be utilizing the Zoom chat feature for motions, seconds, and voting, with the exception of the officer's election, where we will use the survey tool, which is enabled by Zoom. Please use the raise hand function if you wish to be recognized. If you have any difficulties, please identify the problem in the chat feature, and an MAPC staff person will assist you. Council members calling in by phone will be asked by our technical support team to identify themselves. The technical staff will rename those callers. Voting by phone participants will be oral and will occur after all others have voted on a given motion. So now we are going to move to the election of executive committee seats in the city and town caucuses. So I'm going to call on all members of the council representing cities and towns or their alternates to meet in caucus to elect one executive committee member in each of those caucuses. City representatives will be invited to join a city caucus breakout room, and town representatives will be invited to join a town caucus breakout room. Members will need to click join to enter the rooms and participate in the elections. The remaining council members and members of the public, will remain in the main room to listen to a legislative update from the MAPC. And so you all are aware, for the city seat, we have a representative of the city of Somerville, Tom Galligani, running for the city seat. And for the town seat, we have a representative of the town of Arlington, Sandy Pooler, running for the town seat. So I think we are now ready for staff to send the breakout room invite to all of those members of those caucuses.
Thanks, Adam. Folks, if you are in a city or town caucus, I have added you to a breakout room. I'm going to open the rooms now. If you do not receive an invitation, please send me a message. Only city or town representatives should be receiving a breakout room invitation right now.
Okay, so now that folks are joining their breakout rooms, I will ask Leah Robbins to provide a legislative update, Director of Government Affairs, to provide a legislative update from the MAPC. So do we have you, Leah? There we go. Okay, the floor is yours, Leah.
Great. Okay, I couldn't unmute there for a quick second. Let me share my screen real quick. Can you guys see okay? Great. So I just want to give a quick update. As I think most folks know, we just started the 2-year legislative session in January, and my name is Leah Robbins. I'm Director of Government Affairs here at MAPC. And it's really getting underway now in the legislature, with the governor appointing her secretaries and her leadership team, and the House and Senate late last month announcing their leadership teams and committee assignments. This is the first legislative session since Metro Common was adopted, and MAPC's executive committee endorsed a broad slate of legislative priorities really rooted in the goals set in Metro Common. These bills will work to improve public transit access, create more affordable housing, support the Commonwealth's ambitious climate goals, invest in cultural assets, and ensure municipalities have the resources they need to support their residents. I'm here to ask you to encourage your legislator to support MAPC's legislative priorities. We'll put a link in the chat where you can read up more about the priorities on our website. And then sample text that you can use to contact your legislator about these priorities. So I think most folks know legislators have an expanded timeline this session for co-sponsoring bills, so it is not too late. It is definitely still a perfect time to contact them to encourage support of these pending bills. I also want to give a quick update on the fiscal year 24 budget, which dropped yesterday from the Healy-Driscoll administration. Budgets are really the value statement for what we as a Commonwealth are going to be prioritizing. And there's a lot of really good news in this budget that was released yesterday. Of key importance for municipalities, there was the increase in local aid by $635 million, an increase in UGA over consensus revenue estimates, which is a huge win, a doubling of the community compact program, including the efficiency and regionalization grant program. And then for the two line items that MAPC deeply prioritizes, the Shannon grant program, which works to address youth violence in communities, that was level funded at $12.3 million. And the district local technical assistance program that enables us to work with communities on a variety of technical programs was also level funded. We are going to be working with colleagues across the regional planning agencies and municipalities to increase those amounts. We're requesting that the Shannon program be increased to 13.4 million, bringing us back to the high of the program back before the Great Recession, and an increase to district local technical assistance as well. So just as you all know, the proposal goes next to the House with debate expected in April, and then to the Senate with their debate in May, and a conference committee negotiating the differences of those with the final budget hopefully in place before the July 1 start of the fiscal year. If you have any questions about these proposals or what's happening in the budget, please do reach out. Would love to talk more, and we'll be sharing a summary of the budget very soon as well. Just a quick highlight of other bills on the move while we're wrapping up here. Just yesterday, the House advanced a supplemental budget that the governor had filed back in January. It is very exciting. It includes a lot of deeply needed funding to address our shelter systems in the Commonwealth. And given that we are meeting remotely today, I want to mention too, it does include an extension of the hybrid meeting provisions until March of 2025. It's not the permanent extension that I think many on this call have been advocating for, but it would give time for the legislature to fully consider the many bills on this topic that were filed this session. Another bill that is in the hopper that I know is of deep importance to many is the Chapter 90 bond bill that was filed by the governor in January. The administration proposed $400 million over 2 years, which would be level funding of $200 million each year, but does provide that certainty that cities and towns have been asking for a number of years, and MAPC has been loudly asking for, to have that consistency across fiscal years. We are requesting an increase to at least $300 million a year, and a hearing has been scheduled by the Transportation Committee for later this month. So we're really in the swing of things here. Our legislative committee is up and meeting every month, considering other proposals and learning more about how we can engage on these critical issues. If this is interesting to you, please reach out. Would love to continue the conversation with the incredible members of the government affairs team, Matt Walsh and Georgia Barlow, who are both on this call too, if you want to chat us with any questions. And that is what I've got. Adam, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Leah. Excellent, excellent work. And thank you to you and the team. So I'm receiving word that the city caucus is complete, and I think folks are rejoining us. Any word on the town caucus? Still working?
No word yet.
No word yet. Okay.
There's a question in the chat about the extension of remote meetings. And just to be a little more clear, the House voted yesterday that they to advance a bill that included an extension until 2025. That bill is now going to the Senate for consideration. So we will see when the Senate takes up that proposal, hopefully in advance of that March 31st deadline. So still very much in progress.
Thank you, Leah. All right, I just got word that the town caucus has completed. So let's just give it about 30 seconds for everybody to come back to the main room, and we will move into the next agenda item. And I believe we had 2 successful elections. So I think we have 2 new members of the executive committee.
I believe everyone is back.
Everybody's back. Great. All right. Very efficient use of time. Thank you to both members of both the City and Town Caucus, and congratulations to Tom and Sandy on their election. Welcome to the Executive Committee. Appreciate it. All right, moving to the next item of the agenda, we have an election of officers by the council that we need to conduct. So we're going to move to this agenda item, and just a quick background. The officers are elected on an annual basis. However, the vice president, the person serving as vice president, Monica Tibbetts-Nutt, who we're going to hear from later on today's agenda, moved to the role of undersecretary of the Department of Transportation at the state level in the new Healy administration. In doing so, needed to resign her seat serving as vice president of the MAPC. The bylaws allow the executive director to temporarily replace members of the officers. So in that temporary fashion, Jennifer Constable, who had been serving on the officers as secretary, was moved into the vice president's role. And Imai Ayu, who had not been serving on the officers, was appointed into the secretary's role. Both Jennifer and Imai are now running for those seats to serve out the remainder of this year, and then would need to run again for the following year for the annual elections. There is also another member of the council running for that vice president seat, John Featherston. And both Jennifer and John have been able to submit statements that were circulated to all of you in regards to their candidacy. And I believe Imai, though running unopposed, also did submit a statement. If Mark could give me a nod if that is the case or not. It is. Okay, great. So let's move into that portion, or let's move into that election. And actually, excuse me. Are there on the floor, are there any nominations or motions to nominate other candidates? Okay, seeing none. I believe what I need to do, someone guide me here. Can I take one motion to close nominations for both seats, or do I need to do two motions? One motion. One motion, great. Okay, so I will entertain a motion from a member of the council to close nominations. That's been moved by Karen Canfield. Can I have a second in the chat? Okay, that has been seconded. Thank you. And now I will call the roll, or if you could just vote in the chat affirmatively to close the nominations. Okay. Okay. Just let this voting stop. Okay, nominations are effectively closed. So let's first move to the vote for the vice president's seat. And this is the election that I mentioned we would be using the survey function for, to make it easier to tally the votes, as opposed to using the chat feature. So Sasha, will you be enabling that feature? Great, thank you.
Yes, one moment. Folks, just as a reminder, if you are not an MAPC council member, please do not vote on this poll. Only MAPC council members should be participating in this poll right now. If the primary voter is present, alternates, please do not participate in the poll. Alternates should only be participating in this poll if your primary voter is not present. All primary voters should be participating. And if you are not a council member, please do not complete this poll. Okay, it looks like, one moment.
I think we'd like to achieve a quorum in the vote. Okay, looks like we've had 64 votes cast. I think we are looking to get to 67 votes to make this a qualifying vote.
68.
68, thank you.
We've already achieved quorum at the meeting, so I don't know that that is necessary.
Okay, thank you for that. And then Sasha, once this has been finalized, do we need to take any votes from those joining by phone?
Yes. Why don't we take the vote by phone now?
Okay.
Jeanette, I've unmuted you. Can you please voice your vote by phone? And as a reminder, you can press *6 to unmute.
This is Jeanette Fasano. I vote in favor.
In favor
Jeanette,
of,
could you select a candidate between Jennifer Berardi Constable, John Featherston, or abstaining from the vote?
Jennifer.
Thank you.
okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results.
Great, thank you, Sasha. So counting Jeanette's vote, the tally appears to be Jennifer Constable receiving 48 votes, John Featherston receiving 10 votes, and 10 abstentions. Congratulations, Jen, on being elected and continuing to serve as Vice President. Okay, thank you, everybody. And now we will move into the vote for the Secretary's role. And Sasha, will we use the survey again? Great, okay, thank you. So why this is tallying up and members are voting, should we ask Jeanette if she would like to cast her vote? Jeanette, could we ask you to either cast your vote for Imai as a candidate for secretary or abstain from the vote?
No, I'll cast my in favor of mine.
Thank you.
Everyone has voted.
So if I'm looking at that right, that looks like we have 65 votes for Imai with 4 abstentions. Imai, congratulations on being elected to serve as secretary as a member of the officers. Okay, thank you. That was a great tool. That would make that very, very easy to calculate. Thank you for doing that. So before moving on to the next agenda item, I would just say again, congratulations to Jen and Imai, and thank you to John for running and for showing your interest in serving in leadership on the MAPC. I know in the future there certainly will be more opportunities to express an interest in potential to serve in leadership. So we're very glad that you put your name forward today, and thank you for doing so. So with that, let's move to the fifth item on the agenda, adoption of updated MAPC bylaws. An updated bylaw proposal has been shared with council members and recommended for adoption by the executive committee. Mark, would you like to do any further description as opposed to, beyond what was shared, or would you like to just see if there's any questions on what was shared?
Is this in regard to bylaws, Adam?
This is the bylaw question.
Yeah, I would only note that we're asking for some relatively minor bylaw changes here. This is the first time, I think, in the many years I've been at MAPC that we ran into a situation where we had a vacancy in the officers prior to a council meeting, and I needed to exercise, with the approval of the executive committee, the ability to appoint temporary folks to fill in the position of vice president and then subsequently the position of secretary. That is authorized in the bylaws, but it's a little unclear in the bylaws whether whether the executive committee needed to call into service a nominating committee at that point in time, which would not have been practical, given that this was only to fill positions for a short period of time before today's council meeting. So we wanted to clarify that in the bylaws, and to make it clear that when filling vacancies temporarily, that's up to the executive director and the executive committee without needing to go through the entire nominating committee process that we normally do, and that we will in fact be doing for the vote in May. The second change we wanted to make was in regard to counting quorum. You've all been sitting through these difficult quorum calls at the beginning of these meetings now for a couple of years. And we always seem to just squeak by, but we just squeak by. And in May, we're going to hold an in-person meeting. And, we don't know if that's going to help us achieving quorum or make it more difficult to achieve quorum, but I'm bound and determined to get the members of this council together in a room, more to socialize with each other in addition to holding a business meeting. And so we wanted to slightly change the process by which we select quorum or determine quorum. And that is we would not have to count those municipal seats that are currently vacant in the denominator of this calculation. Today, we had a quorum requirement of 68, but that included a lot of seats that were actually vacant. If it didn't, our quorum would have been 54, which would still be quite substantial, but would have been slightly easier to achieve. And we would like to have that change in place, especially before we start holding in-person meetings again. The third and final change is on amending the bylaws themselves. Currently, there's a requirement that a 2/3 vote be needed to change bylaws. We are suggesting that should be a majority vote, a simple majority vote. That will not apply today, but in the future, we would make bylaw changes by a majority vote of the council. So I should note that all three of these changes have the endorsement of both the officers and the executive committee, which voted unanimously to recommend their approval to council. And we are hoping that you will approve them as a package today. Thank you, Adam. And thanks particularly to Margie Weinberger and Allison Zimmern, our counselors from the legal department, who worked on these bylaw changes and made recommendations to us.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks to Margie and Allison as well. Any questions before I entertain a motion? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. So why don't we entertain a motion? Mo Handel has moved adoption, seconded by Aaron Wortman. What I will ask you to do if you're voting in favor is to utilize the chat, and I will ask for the ayes first. Once I see the ayes stop, I will ask for any negative votes. Okay, I think we seem to have collected all of the votes in the affirmative. Are there any negative votes? Okay, and are there any abstentions? Okay, seeing none, I call this a vote in the affirmative. This motion carries. Thank you, everybody. And again, thank you to Mark and the team for putting this forward. Next, we're going to move to a report of the treasurer from our treasurer, Sam Seidel, which will include a request to consider the adoption of the mid-year FY23 budget, as well as an approval of the FY24 MAPC assessment. So Sam, I will now turn it over to you to provide your report. You know what, while we're waiting for Sam, I apologize. I neglected to ask for Jeanette to vote orally on the vote of the bylaws. Jeanette, could I ask you to cast your vote on the bylaws?
Yes.
Thank you, Jeanette. Appreciate it. Okay,
Hi,
Sam, the floor is
everybody.
now yours.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Sam Seidel, treasurer of MAPC. Lots of business in the business side of the meeting, and I thank you for your patience. Today, we are going to do two items. We're going to look at the mid-year budget, which is something we do every year right around this time, where we examine where we are, true up our numbers, and as the phrase that I heard when I first became treasurer, make sure that we can land the plane safely when we get to June at the end of this year. It's one of the practices that MAPC does as a prudent budgeting matter, and it makes a lot of sense, and it's exactly what we're going to review today. And then secondly, we'll look at the local assessment, which is also something we do right around this time of year, and that will get us ready for the FY24 budget. So those are the two items before you. First, we're going to start with the mid-year budget review. You will see that you have received a summary budget, a single sheet of paper that basically outlines what is going on in the budget. And I'm going to walk through that now and just give you some details so you have some sense of what's going on. It's an interesting budget in a lot of ways. I call it a blue sky with a cloud with a silver lining budget. And I'm going to explain to you right now why I came up with that name. So why don't we start with the blue sky? The blue sky is that MAPC is very popular. MAPC is well liked, and the way people are expressing how much they like MAPC is by asking them to do more work. And it's just been kind of astounding how much that is the case. And to give you a sense of what I mean when I say that, if you look at your summary budget sheet and you go way over to the right-hand column, you'll see the top three numbers there. The first number is total revenue. It's actually a negative number. The next number below that is the direct non-staff project costs. That's also a negative number. But below that is the net available for internal operations, and that is a positive number. And so what are these numbers telling us? Basically, the top two numbers are money that is pass-through money. It's money that comes in from places like the federal government and then goes out the door again. And the reason those are negative numbers is because it always, and this is generally always the case, it takes the federal government is overly optimistic about how much money they're going to send out. And then it takes longer for it to get to us, which takes longer for us to send it back out the door. Those numbers are negative because we're just making it more accurate to what we expect to have from the federal government. The third number is the important number, and that's the money that is still available in the agency to do the work, to do the important work that the agency does. And you'll notice that that number is up by well over $500,000. So that $688,000 is $688,000 more dollars than what we expected in the budget we drew up 6 months ago. And that describes basically the health of the agency. There is a lot of good work going on and a lot more work than what we even predicted 6 months ago. So if that's the blue sky, what's the cloud? The cloud is when you have all this work, you have to staff up at appropriate levels to get the work done. And that continues to be a challenge. It was a challenge during COVID. There are a lot of knock-on effects. It's a very tight labor market, and it's just been difficult to make sure we've got enough people on staff at the time to get through all of this work. To deal with that, Mark and the finance team, including Anna and the deputy directors, Lizzie and Catherine and a lot of other people have done a lot of hard work, and they've come up with basically a strategic plan that says we're going to hire more staff. That, of course, is job one, and that's in process. There are a lot of jobs posted and more coming down the line. They have asked their directors to go back and do a really hard look at what the directors think they actually will get done this year, as opposed to what they're going to probably need to get done next year. And then they've looked really hard at how much we can actually bill to direct labor as opposed to what we bill to admin. The implications of this are the second point I want to point you to on the budget summary sheet, which is when we looked at how much we can actually bill to direct labor versus what we're really honestly billing to admin. It turns out that we bill a little bit less to direct labor than we were hoping, than that was sort of our optimistic scenario, and a little bit more to admin. And the net effect of that is that the overhead rate, so if you go down about 2/3 down the list of items on the budget summary sheet, you'll see overhead rate. That's actually going up from 118%, 1.18 to 1.21, 121%. That 121% is just a realistic assessment of what we need to bill to admin as opposed to what we're going to bill to direct labor. There's some paperwork involved in actually changing that number. And I know MAPC and the team is busy doing that right now. So they are adjusting that. I think what I see on my screen is assessments, which is one step ahead of where we are in this conversation. Here we are in the budget summary sheet, and you'll see the overhead rate on my screen is right the center of the sheet. That's up to 121%. So that's what's in process right now. And then the third thing that the team asked their directors to do was to go back and really, as Mark said, sharpen their pencils, which is a metaphor that almost doesn't make sense anymore, but to really take an honest, hard look at what we're going to get done this year versus what we're going to get done next year. And that's where the silver lining sits, because if you go one line up from the overhead rate, you'll see the excess revenue to be realized in FY24. And you'll see that number went up from 0 in the left-hand column to 375,000 in the middle column. And what that's saying is that we're going to start off next year in even better condition with work already lined up, ready to go. It just means we're going to hit the ground running with all the other work we've got. We've got that work as well.
Sam, could I interrupt for just a moment?
Yes, please.
I'm wondering, I'm glad that the summary sheet has been placed up on the screen. I'm wondering with our tech staff if there's any way to increase the size of that document in its presentation. If there isn't, that's fine. But if there is, I think for some people it might be difficult to see.
I will let the tech staff work on that.
I think it's getting better. Yeah.
I'm actually getting towards the end of my presentation. I know it's a lot of information that I'm just throwing at you, but it's just trying to cover what's in this summary sheet so you have a sense of it. I just want to close by saying that the revenue numbers and some of the unexpected income that is not on the summary sheet. You won't see these numbers on the sheet, but it's elsewhere in our larger financial data. A couple of examples of some of the projects that have come online since we filed the first budget 6 months ago. The Good Jobs Challenge at $705,000. That was not expected then, but has happened since then. DLTA funds come in at a little over $500,000, and then DLTA augmentation at $371,000. So that's money that has showed up since we did our initial budget 6 months ago, but is reflected in this mid-year budget. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that I can or hand it over to the staff for any clarifications they could provide. And while I'm also saying that, I will hand this back to Adam for the approval of the council. The executive committee has approved this budget with a favorable recommendation that it be adopted by the full council. So that concludes the mid-year budget review.
Thank you very much, Sam. So before entertaining a motion, let me just ask if there are any questions from the members or attendees?
I would note, if I could, Adam and
Yes.
Sam, first of all, a big thanks to Sam and the members of Finance Committee, Yolanda Greaves and Tabor Keeley, for being actively involved in this year's mid-year budget review. And a big thanks to Anna Cole, our finance director, and her team for helping to put the mid-year budget together. This was her first since taking over as director of finance. I would note this was a somewhat more challenging mid-year budget than usual, particularly because of difficulties in achieving the overhead rate, which is a requirement from our federal funding partners. But we were able to do it, and the overall budget is sound. We are expecting to end with a very, very slight increase in fund balance, which is exactly what we should be doing. And we are hoping to hire the additional staff needed to get the work done, since the pressure of our contracts is great and there's a lot of important work to do. I certainly feel comfortable with it, and I hope the council will adopt it so we can move forward in implementing it for the remainder of this fiscal year.
Thank you, Mark. So I haven't seen any hands risen to ask any questions, so I will entertain a motion to approve this mid-year budget. Motion to accept by Frank Tremontosi, and we have a series of seconds, so the motion has been made and seconded. Before calling the roll, are there any questions, comments, or statements on the motion before the body? Okay, seeing none, I will call the roll, and let's do this the same way. If those voting aye could vote first. Okay. All right, we seem to have reached the end of the stream of affirmative votes. Anybody voting negative, please do so now. Okay, and any abstentions? Okay, seeing none, this motion carries and the FY23 mid-year budget has been approved. I do want to make a quick note based on some questions that were in the chat earlier. These votes will be called at the discretion of the chair based on the closeness of the margin one way or the other. However, the final vote totals will be tallied and reported in the minutes when they are made available following the meeting. So moving on to the next part of the treasurer's report is the FY24 MAPC assessment. Sam, are you going to offer comments on that as well?
I'm going to just make a couple of very brief comments,
Great.
and I'll hand it back to you. So this is the FY24 local assessment. We do this every year. We do it right around this time of the year. It includes the 2.5% increase that is our standard for what we put forward to the full council. These dollars are very nimble, they're very flexible, and they're very important to the agency as the agency thinks about how it's going to approach the various challenges that will come up over the course of the year. So in that sense, the local assessment is very important. And with that, I will complete and conclude my comments. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything. If not, I'll hand it back to you, Adam.
Thank you, Sam. Are there any questions from those in attendance on this proposed assessment? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So I will entertain a motion to approve this FY24 assessment. Motion's been made by Aaron, seconded by Yolanda Greaves. So we have a motion that's been made and seconded. Any comments, questions, statements on the motion? Okay, seeing none. All those voting in the affirmative, please vote now. Jeanette, I neglected to do this on the prior vote, but could I ask you to cast your vote on this question?
Yes.
Thank you, Jeanette.
Affirmative.
And okay, now anybody voting negatively? And against the motion? Please do so now. And any abstentions? Okay, looks like the motion carries. Thank you, Sam.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks to everybody. And thanks to the finance team and the finance committee, especially. Lots of thanks.
Thank you, Sam. Yes, great work by the whole team to get it to where it's at today. So I think maybe one more vote we have to take before we get to a vote to adjourn later, and that is on approval of the minutes of the fall 2022 council meeting, which I believe was also distributed along with other materials regarding today's agenda. Could I ask for a motion to approve these minutes? Anybody?
Everyone's tired of making motions.
Do I see? Is that Mo and Yolanda? Thank you. It wasn't popping up on my screen. Thank you. All right. So the minutes have been moved and seconded. Any questions, comments, statements on these minutes? Okay. Seeing none, I'd ask the ayes to vote first. Jeanette, could I ask you to vote on these minutes?
Yes.
Thank you, Jeanette. Okay, now anybody voting in the negatives, please do. And any abstentions? Thank you. Motion carries, and the minutes of the 2022 Fall Council meeting have been approved. Thank you, everybody. All right, I will now call on Mark to provide a report of the Executive Director. The floor is yours, Mark.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. And thanks for putting up with all of the business of this business meeting. This is an exceptionally long business meeting. Sometimes we have council and the business is done in 2 minutes, but today it just happened to be that we had a lot to do. And I know that on behalf of myself and the executive leadership team and the officers, we're all appreciative of your sticking with it and participating in the efforts to govern this organization. There's a lot going on at MAPC. I'm only going to mention 3 things. My staff knows I try to mention things in groups of 3. So that's what I think I'll do today. I want to talk a little bit about some of the work of our transportation team. They have been doing a tremendous and incredible job over the course of the past several months. One of our big successes, which we achieved together with our colleagues at CTPS and the Boston Region MPO, is the achievement of a huge state Safe Streets grant from the federal government to be implemented over the course of several years to help and try advance the region toward our vision of 0 serious injuries and deaths to pedestrians and bicyclists on our roads and trails in the greater Boston area. Vision 0 has been a goal of this organization and most of our compatriots in the advocacy, the transit and transportation community, and state agencies now for several years. And the Safe Streets grant will enable us to work with cities and towns throughout the region to try and plan for and achieve that vision. I'm very proud of the fact that we received those extremely competitive and sought after federal funds, and a big congratulations to our Director of Transportation, Eric Barassa, and my colleague, the Executive Director of CTPS, Tegan Teich, for achieving that grant. I think Dave Moeller, who's the chair of the Boston Region MPO, is also with us this morning. And so a big thanks and congratulations to David. There's exceptional additional work going on in the transportation team, tremendous work on trails, which we are doing with DCR and with all of our sister regional planning agencies throughout the state to create a state-of-the-art, accurate and usable trails map throughout Massachusetts. There is, thank you for the thumbs up from Buzz Constable, a long-standing supporter of our trails work. The exciting app to table research on food deliveries and their impact on the transportation system and on congestion has recently been published. Chief researchers there, Allison Felix and Travis Pollock from our transportation team. And there's a tremendous amount of ongoing technical assistance work to individual cities and towns by the transportation department. So big kudos to that team for their work and their accomplishments. There's many things going on in the land use division, always one of our largest departments, and the one that typically has the longest list of technical assistance projects to cities and towns. But there is no doubt that the single item getting the most attention at the moment is compliance with the MBTA communities multifamily zoning requirement, which is a big and important issue. A challenging piece of legislation adopted a year ago by the General Court and signed by Governor Baker. We believe that it is appropriate public policy and important to enabling there to be an increase in homes throughout our region, which we desperately need, and to do so equitably throughout the communities of the Commonwealth. However, it cannot be implemented without challenge and attention. There are many concerns in many communities about the details of implementation. We understand those, and we're helping communities to take them on. We worked on the guidelines with the administration actively. We did not get all the suggestions that we made adopted, but we got many of them adopted, and we haven't stopped. I just sent a letter on inclusionary zoning and affordable units to the administration a few days ago, and we are going to continue to work on a wide array of implementation issues through technical assistance to cities and towns and through ongoing advocacy now to the Healy-Driscoll administration. We are particularly focusing on two things right now in terms of 3A implementation. One is that the so-called rapid transit communities, it's 12 communities, but they tend to be very large communities. They are going to have to come up with their compliance plans, I think, by December of 2023. So they're kind of the first up. And we are working with them individually, but also as a group to assess the current level of compliance and to suggest ways, sometimes small, sometimes larger, for those communities to actually bring their zoning ordinances into compliance. A lot of detailed work with them. We are also working with basically individual communities throughout the region, because 97 of our 101 communities are involved in that work. And they will have to comply, the 97 out of 101 that are in the MBTA district. And we are working with those communities who have come to us seeking technical assistance, everything from helping to manage community engagement to doing technical analysis, or in some cases, actually writing the zoning. We are especially focused on the communities that have determined that they would like to have an affordable component to the multifamily requirement in their communities. This is a tremendous amount of work for the agency. And to be perfectly honest, part of our hiring additional staff is to help with that effort. And a number of our land use specialists who are not actually in the housing division are now providing support and assistance to the housing division to try and deal with this inflow of need from our cities and towns to help comply with 3A. This is not going to be over in a month, and it's not going to be over in a year, but our goal is that communities will be able to comfortably and equitably comply with the statute, and we as a region will be able to increase our housing stock as a result, which we need for social, equity, and economic reasons throughout the greater Boston area. Big thanks and congratulations, particularly I would say to the data services staff, Tim Reardon and his team, and to our housing leader, Karina Oliver Milchman, and her team for their work on this effort. The last thing I'm going to mention, I always get in trouble because I can't mention every single department and everything that we're doing, is some of the work of our public health department. There is a tremendous amount of ongoing concern about COVID and other infectious diseases. A little better in the last couple of months, but December and January were challenging. And even beyond that, many of our public health departments, our local public health departments, have found that the demand for their services is even greater now in the post-COVID world, not always related specifically to COVID issues, than it was 3 years ago. And this at precisely the time when there are tremendous staffing challenges in the public health and healthcare field in Massachusetts and honestly throughout America. Our public health team, led by Barry Keppard and Heidi Stucker, have really been working with those public health departments to help them to share information, to meet ongoing challenges, to implement the Public Health Excellence Awards that often involve public health work across municipal lines, and in many other ways deal with the complex world of that we sort of call always in quotations post-COVID. It's been a difficult and challenging time. I know that everybody on this Zoom call knows that it's been especially difficult for the people who work in healthcare and in public health. And honestly, they have not always been treated as well as they should be, considering that they were heroes during the pandemic. But we are there working with them, trying to make their lives easier and trying to help improve the caliber and extent and range of the services that they are trying to provide to our cities and towns and the residents of those cities and towns. A big thank you to Barry and Heidi and his team, their team, for all the work that's going on in that field. For those of you who are interested in following some of the additional work of all of our other departments and divisions, those are always summarized in my executive director's report, the written executive director's report to the executive team, to the executive committee, and those do go up on our website and can be accessed. And of course, Lizzie and Catherine and I are always willing to answer your questions if you email us after this meeting. Adam, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Excellent report, as always. So let's move into the next agenda item. We're going to go back to where we tried to start before we achieved quorum. And I'm going to ask Lizzie to come back on to present the Davidson Staff Achievement Award to Human Resources Manager Holly Lewis. So Lizzie, now giving you the floor once again.
Thank you so much, Adam. And just thank you so much to everybody who has helped make this meeting a success today. It is a lot of behind the scenes choreography, but I just wanted to take a moment and thank everyone. But I am so thrilled to be able to present the next part of our meeting today, our Robert Davidson Staff Achievement Award. This award is actually named after one of MAPC's first executive directors, and I am so thrilled that we are able to award it to Holly today. So I'm going to give you a little more information about Holly. I'm going to embarrass her. She will probably be unhappy with me later. And since we are both in the office, she'll be able to go right down the hall and tell me. But I'm thrilled to be able to do it. It's worth it, Holly. So Holly really, as our HR manager, is the backbone of almost every day at this agency. She started at MAPC in June of 2018 and just immediately became the right hand for all of our HR work, standardizing our hiring processes and our procedures and making them more equitable and inclusive. At the time, she was working together with our then general counsel, Jennifer Garcia. But honestly, almost immediately, Holly's job expanded to be so many other things. She is a counselor. She is a confidant. She is everybody's biggest fan. And she really loves the people who work at this agency. And she does everything she can, literally day or night, to make our jobs better and easier. Without Holly, MAPC would not have been able to bring in all of the incredible new talent that lets us do the work that we do to serve our cities and towns. Many of you have probably heard, because Mark has talked about it, I have talked about it, that Over a third of MAPC's current workforce is new since the pandemic. And what that translates to is really just an incredible amount of recruitment. But it also means doing the work to focus on the retention of the people who are here. It means thinking about how we create an office culture that fosters growth and support for our existing staff. But it's also not just MAPC staff. Many people don't know that our HR, finance, legal, and operations teams also provide support to our sister agency, CTPS, the Central Transportation Planning staff, which effectively means that Holly manages two sets of circuses, MAPCs and CTPSs. Among the many nominations that we received for this award, Holly's name came up again and again and again. And because I know Holly well, I know that it's this particular fact that means the most to her, that her colleagues who she respects so much think that she is the person who really deserves to be recognized for her work at the agency. So at the risk of making Holly emotional, I wanted to share some of the words that our colleagues shared about her. So these are direct quotes from the nominations. Whenever somebody mentions Holly, they mention how welcoming, helpful, and kind she is. Holly makes our agency stronger, and she has an incredible impact on the day-to-day of the agency. Holly brings care and consideration to every interaction that she has with MAPC employees, and she has provided steady support to so many during stressful and uncertain times. And Holly's unflappable demeanor and grounded sense of humor, which is so true, means that every interaction with her is a balm, even during difficult conversations. So Holly, I hope you know how deeply everyone appreciates the work that you do at MAPC and how much I personally value your amazing heart and most of all, your friendship. I'm going to turn it over very quickly to MAPC's Director of Equity and Culture, Angela Howard, who is also Holly's direct supervisor, because she also wanted to say a few words.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Holly. I just wanted to say out loud in front of everyone how proud I am to work with you. You are the backbone of the HR department, and I'm very thankful and very blessed to have someone so dedicated and talented on the team. So I just wanted to say that out loud. I know we're short for time, but I just wanted to say thank you for everything you do, and thank you for not just being my colleague, but for being a friend as well.
Thank you, Angela. I ask all of you to please join me in congratulating Holly. And Holly, we're going to turn it over to you to say a few words. I know this can be really emotional and stressful, but everyone is excited to hear from you. Oh, wait, you need to be able to unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you, Lizzie, and everyone for your kind words. It's truly appreciated. If you know me well, you very much know that I'm not a fan of the spotlight. My goal is to always, and prefer to be in the background. I like to shine the light more so on others. So with that being said, I will make this short and sweet. I am extremely honored and also surprised to be receiving this Davidson Award today. I do not take my role lightly. I truly enjoy helping people make sure that they feel both seen and heard. I'm glad that I get the privilege to work with such passionate and inspiring individuals on a daily basis at both MAPC and CTPS. In honor of Women's History Month, I would also like to acknowledge that I've had the opportunity to be mentored and also surrounded by amazing and trailblazing women. And one of them, which of being my mother, they've all helped me blossom into the woman that I am becoming. Lastly, but also definitely not least, I would like to thank my team because they are such a huge part of why I am able to receive this award today. Their dedication and their hard work do not go unannounced and unnoticed. Again, thank you so much for this award. I hope to continue to live up to this honorable recognition. And I hope that you all have been able to not only enjoy the agency, but what it is that we truly do and we try to ensure keeps continuing. So again, thank you very much.
Congratulations, Holly. Thank you to Lizzie. Thank you to Angela. Best part of this agenda, no doubt, right? It's such a great opportunity to honor the great work that Holly is doing, but also a great modeling of the way an organization should run and recognizing good work by its employees. So great job by the team. And again, congratulations, Holly. Keep up the good work. We all appreciate it very much. So we're going to move on to our keynote presentation. And to introduce that, I am going to ask Catherine Antos to once again take the floor to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Adam. And again, Holly, I know you're probably happy to no longer be in the spotlight, but I can't just reiterate how much we appreciate you, how you truly put the human in human resources. We are all better for the privilege of working with you. So thank you, Holly. And thank you, Adam, for creating the space on today's meeting to recognize such an amazing colleague. I am now honored to introduce our new Undersecretary of Transportation for the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, Monica Tibbetts-Nutt. Prior to joining the Healy-Driscoll administration, the Undersecretary has served on the MassDOT Board of Directors and as the Vice Chair of the Fiscal Management and Control Board that oversaw the MBTA from 2015 to 2021. However, this body, of course, knows the Undersecretary as a former member of our council and our previous Vice President. Undersecretary, we are indebted to your leadership. And as residents of the Commonwealth, we are indebted to your skill in bringing together transportation planning, urban design, and transit equity in all the roles that you have served and are continuing to serve. Our budgets are our values, and Governor Healy's budget announced yesterday just further reflects so many of the values that the Undersecretary has championed, including a low-income fare pilot, transportation resilience, historic MBTA investments to support operations and improvements. So it's now my honor to now turn it over to Monica Tibbetts-Nutt, Undersecretary of Transportation. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. I appreciate you all having me here. This is definitely in a different form than I normally get to see all of you. And obviously Undersecretary really rolls off the tongue. So most of you know me as Monica, so we'll just kind of continue with that. But I do want to say congratulations to Holly. I will be reaching out and we'll see if we can steal you over to DOT as soon as we possibly can. I'm kidding, Lizzie. I can see your face right now. So, you know, as you all know, the budget was released yesterday. And as Catherine said, the budget does reflect the values of the Commonwealth and of this administration. So I just want to touch on some of the focuses for DOT and of my office. Regional transportation is where we're going to start. As you all know, I love the inner core and I care deeply about the inner core, but we do have 351 towns and cities. And I think for us, we want to continue to support the inner core, but also make sure that we're being responsive to the rest of the Commonwealth. I think this is even more important now. I don't want to say post-pandemic, but in the period of time that we're in now, just because quite honestly, the housing patterns have changed. People have shifted outside of the inner core for many different reasons. Some people just wanted more space, but a lot of people, quite honestly, have just been priced out and they're continuing to be priced out. And with the option of doing hybrid work, it has given people the opportunity to be able to afford to live in different communities while maintaining their jobs. This has had a massive impact on our transit system. As you all know, the MBTA is struggling right now. It is a system from the 1800s, and I think we are all really starting to understand the age of the system. But there is an opportunity as we are making changes to the system, as we are looking at more regional transportation projects, whether it's regional rail, whether it is continued investment and better coordination with our regional transit authorities. This administration wants to be able to serve and wants to be able to serve everyone. Going along with that, equity. Equity and safety. This is something I have talked about numerous times with many of you. They are the umbrellas on which all of the rest of this falls. Catherine mentioned the low-income fare. This is something I've been pushing for a number of years. And I have to say it is nice to be in a new position in which I am hopeful that I will be able to continue for it from a different perspective. We have to make transit affordable. We have to give people the opportunity to access options, employment, education. The residents of the Commonwealth are suffering. They have been suffering for the last several years. I think especially when it comes to housing costs, transportation costs, food costs. And it is our responsibility to turn public transit into a public right. And to be able to do that, we need to make it much more affordable. And this isn't just looking at a low-income fare, it is also looking at the commuter rail zones, looking at the cost of those zones, look at how we are pursuing regional rail, not just from a frequency standpoint, not just from a schedule standpoint, but also from a cost standpoint. I actually moved during the pandemic, so now I live in central Massachusetts, and I live about 1.5 miles from a commuter rail station. Fantastic. Connected by a bike path, connected by sidewalks, also costs $400 a month. That, I think, for many families is completely out of reach. I am a public servant, so it is definitely out of reach. And I think that that is just indicative of the issues that many of the families are suffering from. So in that interest, we're not only looking at these regional projects, but we're also making climate a really, really big focus of the work that we're doing. We now have a climate chief, and that climate chief is working throughout the Secretariat and especially with the Department of Transportation to build a climate team at DOT. This is a climate team that's not just going to be focused on environmental planning, not just focused on the MEPA process and the NEPA process, but really focused on climate change across our modes, climate change through our grant programs, climate change in every single thing that we do. The climate chief is going to be looking at the different RFPs, RFIs, and the grant programs that we are pursuing to make sure that as we are going through these procurements, they are consistent with the administration's climate goals. This gives us the opportunity to not only pursue the decarbonization goals of the administration, but also allows us to make the transportation we're providing cleaner and make our environment cleaner for the residents who are having to breathe in this air. As we know, many of our communities have some of the highest asthma rates in the country. And I think starting with transportation, continuing to keep that in the lens as we are looking at these different types of modes, different types of vehicles is going to be even more important than it has been. One of the other things we talk a lot about is housing. I spend a lot of time talking about housing. I've been talking about housing for probably the last almost 20 years that I've been doing this work. The housing situation was a crisis 10 years ago. Now it has hit a point where it's not just pricing people out of communities, it is pricing people out of the Commonwealth. We have made the cost of housing so out of reach for the majority of people who have lived here and want to live here. This isn't just a question of, oh, I want to live in this particular community, I want to live in this particular school district. It's more, I would like to be able to feed my family, but also be able to pay rent at the same time. I think the issue that we're now running into is that it's pushed people so far out of the inner core and so far from transit options that we are basically replacing the amount that they were spending on housing with now the amount that they're spending on transportation. And this really is creating a completely discriminatory system throughout the Commonwealth. One of the things that we have been pushing for is transit-oriented development, which is something that MAPC has been pushing for far before I think anyone in government here in Massachusetts had been talking about it. There was a plan put forward in 2017 for Mass DOT and the MBTA to make this a policy and to really use this as they are doing improvements around the stations. This has not become a reality. This TOD policy and lens has not been consistently used. And I think now with the new administration and the new approach to climate change, this is an opportunity to really do this. We know the rate of development here in Massachusetts. We've seen how it has shifted from commercial and office to now lab space. This is an opportunity working with the development community to build more housing, denser housing around these transit stations. The days of building transit stations, the days of projects like the Green Line extension, those aren't going to happen as much anymore, and for many different reasons, but predominantly around cost. The cost of it and the amount of time it takes. And so I do think the focus really needs to be reinvestment in the existing system, but really a concerted investment in the housing around these transit stations. This is going to require a lot. It's not just going to require a shift in DOT and the MBTA and the way they approach these policies. It's going to require a shift in the way the municipalities view this. As many of you have experienced, and I have experienced over the last several years, trying to get Affordable housing, or really quite honestly, a full spectrum of housing, is a battle of permits. It is a battle of municipalities. It is a battle of education systems. It's a battle of winners, losers, and the people who just don't want more housing in their community. How we approach this and how we break down those barriers is going to have to be consistent across agencies. And I think we are going to have to actually sit and have a very real conversation about the intersection of transportation, economic development, and housing. This administration understands this. I think the budget reflects this, but now we need to actually take that budget, take that focus, and make it a reality. So for us here at DOT and for my team, we are focused on grants, but also process to actually get this money out of the door. It's not just enough to say, oh, we got this grant from DOT. Now we're going to spend it. You know, all of you on this call know we need a process. The process needs to be consistent, and we need to make sure that it is open to all the municipalities, working with nonprofits, for-profits, working with the municipal governments across the Commonwealth is going to be essential. We need to break down kind of the ivory tower that has been created here at 10 Park Plaza and really open our doors to the constituents we serve, but more importantly, actually getting out into the communities that we serve and really living and working our values. As you all know, this is something, access and options, I think I've been talking about for 15 plus years. It's what I always tell my mentees, it's what I tell every student I talk to, is our jobs are actually very simple. We create access, we create options, and we make people able to live a good life and make it so they can actually give a better life to their kids and their families. So building off of this, last thing is, this is my recruitment strategy. We need help. As everyone here knows, our workforce has been greatly diminished. We have a significant amount of retirements, but for the most part, we just don't have younger people coming in. We do not have diverse populations coming into the agency. A lot of this is on us. We need to make sure that we are reflecting the type of community that we actually want to build here. But I think even more importantly, we need to be doing outreach to organizations such as MAPC. We know public service is very, very difficult. They are long hours, very thankless job a lot of the time. But I think unless we all kind of step in, do something, whether it's sitting on a committee, whether it is working at an agency, we are never going to be able to push this forward, even with funding, because there are not enough people to do it. So I urge all of you, work with us, help us to talk to young people, help us to work out into the community at much younger ages so that these kids understand you really want to impact your community. There are many different paths to do it. And just because you are not a white male doesn't mean that you can't find a home in these agencies. And I think as the face of many of us are changing, as you see leadership starting to look a little bit different, I think this is an opportunity for young people to understand that this is an option. Now I'm kind of looking at the comments here. Sorry. Okay, so I am going to comment on the RTAs really quickly because I knew people were going to have a question about this. And I feel like with the budget, RTAs are a major conversation. Regional transit authorities have played a huge part in connecting the region for a very long time. What we've had a very hard time doing is connecting to the MBTA and connecting them to each other. What we're looking at through this new funding program and the new opportunities for the RTAs is to really invest in the systems that are already existing, but invest in them having better options for increasing their services, better options for increasing frequency, but also really working on giving them the opportunity to electrify their fleets. Electrification across the MBTA is profoundly difficult. It does not mean we are not working towards it, but when you were looking at the RTAs, many of them have made these advances, whether they are using hybrid buses, electric buses, whether they have started low-income fare programs, or whether they have made their system free. They are pushing the edge, and now we need to meet them, especially at DOT and the MBTA. So I'm actually incredibly excited. I'll be going out to all of the RTAs to not only just kind of be like, hi, We do actually leave the building occasionally and we will come out and see you, but more, tell us what you need, tell us what you've learned, because that's what's going to take. It is. We're going to have to learn from each other. And like I said, we're going to have to break down these barriers and treat transportation as a regional system as opposed to the fiefdoms that have been created over the last several decades. So with that, like I said, this is a different administration. These are different agencies. We still have a lot to prove, and I know that. I think this is our 30th day here. Yeah, we've been here about a month. It feels much longer than that, but we know we have a lot of work to do. You know, we put forward a lot of goals. We put forward a lot of ideologies. We put forward a lot of things that we want to achieve. And I think for us now, we actually need to start working and we need to start actually achieving this. So with that, like I said, please come join us, tell your friends, tell your family. We are currently hiring, but I really also want to thank you all for having me come back. I think I served on the council almost 13 years, 13, 14 years. And I have to say, I've made many of my friendships through that service. And seeing all of you is really nice, even if it's virtually. But I also just want you to know, in this new role, I am still here for anything any of you need. You all know that I am very responsive, or at least I used to be. So let's add like maybe 2 to 3 weeks response time to any emails, text messages, phone calls, maybe not. But I just do really want to thank you for having me here. It's always an honor to be able to work with you and talk with you. And I think now I have left some time for questions. I think I left time for questions.
Yes, yes, you did. Thank you so much, Monica. We really appreciate it. We truly appreciate your commitment to access and to options and are humbled by your acknowledgement of our work to advance equitable transit-oriented communities. We already have several questions in the chat. I'll just ask folks, particularly if you're just if you didn't see my note, please place your questions for Monica in the chat so that we can have this Q&A discussion now. So Monica, another question that has come up from our newly elected MAPC officer, Imai Ayu. He is curious to know about the grants you mentioned and how they are intended to shift how the more rural municipalities think about zoning and transit-oriented development. And Imai is representing the town of Weston.
I feel like you just opened with a very easy question. So the way that the grant programs are set up now is it gives us much more flexibility in the types of organizations that we can give funding to. And I think it has given us the ability to not just work with the regional transit authorities, but to also work with municipal services, to work with the transportation management associations and other transportation providers that are operating predominantly outside of the inner core. I think the next step as far as how we are going to influence housing around that is difficult. I don't think that we actually have a solid answer on that. I really don't. And I think for a lot of these grant programs, we're actually still putting together the process of actually operating these and being able to put these out on the street. So I don't want to sit here and say that we have the answers. I think this focus on opening up the funding opportunities to more than just the traditional service providers is going to give us some of the best options as far as really making a more robust regional network. And I think the other major thing is it is actually going to benefit the communities, the gateway cities that have invested in the full spectrum of housing. And I think that that's something that doesn't get talked about enough. We talk about the communities where there isn't housing. We talk about the communities that need to build more housing. But I think in that conversation, you really leave out the cities and communities that have built the housing. And so it's not even just focused on just pointing out the communities that need to build more, but it really is actually benefiting, highlighting, and rewarding the communities that have made these commitments to bringing more people into their communities.
Thank you. We also received a few of the same question from Holliston and also from Rentham, but I'm sure this is something on many of our council members' minds of who is the staff who are available from DOT to come and speak with communities about the priorities within their community.
Oh, wow. Now I'm just going to like start putting people's email addresses and my phone is just going to blow up.
You said the last request was too easy, so you know.
Honestly, we are still setting up the priorities of each department and each staff person. I would say, and my staff is probably out here being very upset. I would probably say, actually, you can email the Office of the Undersecretary. We are obviously very involved in how these different departments are being set up, but as these individuals are actually identified, there are people that communities can talk to in the meantime. So I would actually say, go ahead, email us, and we will find someone appropriate to come speak to the communities, to come speak at events like this.
Thank you. You also mentioned this administration's commitment to addressing the climate crisis and the role of the climate chief in working with Massachusetts Department of Transportation. So we have a question from Carolyn Britt in Ipswich, who wants to know, as cities and towns have been asked to increase housing near MBTA stations, what is the T doing to ensure that various transit corridors remain usable in the face of sea level rise? I use the North Shore commuter rail, and I fear that it may be vulnerable within the next 15 to 20 years.
The climate chief, that is really the best connection we have right now. And as I said, we are standing up a climate team here that's not just going to be focused on climate change, but really looking at the clean energy, but really looking at resiliency. I think that's across the country, especially in the coastal areas, one of the biggest concerns is, we're making improvements to the rail, we're making improvements to these stations, but are we actually improving them in a way that is going to be able to withstand sea level rise, withstand the different types of storms that we're dealing with? So this is going to be a focus of DOT. We are also looking at adding more members to the assistant secretaries to address this. And so that is going to be a major focus, also working with the existing environmental planners, existing climate team that is at the MBTA, but making sure that we have centralized communication directly linked to the climate chief.
Thank you. Another question from Marion Nutra in Sherburne. In the absence of a workable RTA in the region in the short term, what is being done to increase parking options at MBTA stations that are outside of the inner core?
That one's tough. A lot of that is really coming down to the real estate. As most of you know, we have shared services across DOT and the MBTA. And as these station improvements are being put in place, parking is obviously being taken into consideration. And I think the really good point is there are many places that don't have RTAs. There are many places that don't have all of the connections, I think, especially to rail. And so we are having people go to the park and rides, having people carpool to these areas, but really making sure that we're having that connection, getting people that first and last mile, which is something I know MAPC has been talking about for a very long time. But the parking really also needs to be taken in consideration with how we're doing housing, how we're doing the TOD. So this is something that has been a very huge focus, especially as we are trying to close these gaps.
Thank you. Then we have a few questions from Franny Osman. The first one is, how will the Healy administration distinguish itself from the Baker administration in terms of connecting the North and South rail system? Also re east-west connections by rail. What plans are you excited about?
I mean, I would probably say, West East Rail. I'm really excited about the commission. I'm excited about that work and excited about the opportunity to really open up Western Massachusetts and make better connections, not just into Boston, but into the communities that it's also passing through as they get to Boston. I think the North-South it's complicated. It's been really difficult. I think it's the reason that no other administrations have taken it on, because it is very, very hard. There are not a lot of options, either public transit, and there aren't a lot of great options from a roadway standpoint, unless you really do just want to genuinely sit on a parking lot for hours at a time to try and do your morning commute. I think the big focus there is not just looking at the commuter rail, but once again, looking at the RTAs that are in that area. But even beyond that, really looking at, are there other transit options that can be provided? Whether that's looking at frequency, whether that's looking into putting in more dedicated bus lanes, looking at bus rapid transit. There are a lot of options, but I think it's really, really going to need to be a focus. It's going to need to be a commitment. And so I think for us, as we're looking at planning for that regional system, the thing that I think that we have an opportunity to do differently is start to actually put together plans. start to actually sit down with the regional service providers and actually work with the municipalities to understand what the needs are, as opposed to just kind of saying generally, we just need to connect the north and south and everything will be fine. I think we really need to have pointed conversations and understand what the municipalities are willing to give for us to be able to put together plans, whether that's looking at lanes, whether that's looking at taking different roads and maybe converting them to bus rapid transit. I think it's going to take effort on the part of the municipality, but I think it's really going to take a new imagination and how we address this. I think one of the big things that I've said in the 4 weeks I've been here is we've kind of run out of the easy solutions. We've run out of the things that we've done before. And now I think it's just going to take an extreme amount of creativity, but I think also an openness to actually try things, to pilot things, because otherwise we're just going to continue to do the same thing and we know exactly what that result is.
And you already touched on this, but I'm going to ask it in case there's more you want to add. Franny also wants to know, knowing that you are a fan and a proponent of bus rapid transit, how do you see adding transit to now congested highways?
Oh, this one's going to get me in so much trouble. And I know why Franny asked this, because she knew it was going to get me in trouble. I love bus rapid transit. I think we need more right-of-way. I think we need to be taking more lanes off of our congested roadways and actually putting buses on them. We know in the places, not just around the country, but the pilots have been done here. You take a lane, you put a bus on it. Not only are you moving those on public transit quicker, but you're also allowing the cars to move quicker as well. Congestion is created by many different things, but the constant changing between lanes is one major contributor to it. So for me, it's just continuing to go back to the municipalities and have these conversations. Are you willing to give up these lanes? Are you willing to help invest in pedestrian and cyclists? Are you willing to start protecting the space that the majority of people could be able to use, and not just continuing to focus on the single occupancy vehicle and on parking, especially on streets? But I think this one's always been difficult. It has. We've been talking about this for a ridiculously long time. Other parts of the country have been doing this for decades, whether that's bus on shoulder, whether it's bus rapid transit. And so I do think it's a major role for the DOT, but even more importantly, the municipalities are going to have to give up the lanes. And I'm not, and this is not calling out any particular municipality, because I think the majority of them have not been great at this. But if they can't give up the lanes, if we can't start having real discussions about zoning, about reforming zoning, reforming the permitting process, we will never be able to unlock those corridors. Because the time of rail projects, we're not going to go build a new rail system. We're not going to build a monorail. We don't have the money. We don't have the time. Buses are the most flexible option we have. Bus rapid transit can be just as good or even better than subways. But the communities have to give up that right of way and have to be open to working with the T, working with DOT to come up with more innovative solutions that are serving a greater percentage of the population than these roadways are currently.
Thank you. Shifting away from buses, what about funding microtransit at a larger scale? Transit needs density, and density in the hinterlands is hard to achieve. And that's coming from Ann McKinnon Jacobs.
So microtransit, I mean, once again, MAPC has spent a significant amount of time researching this, and I use a lot of the research from MAPC when talking about this. I like a full suite of options. I love bus. We all know this. I would love to act as if I love all the other modes as much, but I really do love bus. But I think microtransit is an option, I think, especially in the rural communities, but I think it really needs to be thoughtful. I think it really needs to look at not just operating within a particular municipal boundary, but how are you connecting to other regional services? Are you making the connections that the residents need? I think those are the things that really need to go into the planning for microtransit, because microtransit in and of itself is not just a solution. Just like rail is not just a solution, bus is not just a solution. It has to be part of an integrated system. So I do like microtransit, as long as it is really thinking about the connections and not just operating within a limited geography.
Thanks. And we have time for just a few more questions. So one thing I want to ask, and I know that we aren't going to be able to get to everything that's in the chat, but thank you to all our council members for participating in this great conversation. Monica, I'd like to know, what role do you see community voices playing in your administration? How will it be different or similar as the previous?
I mean, I think for me, it needs to be more than just a checkbox and all the different processes we have, whether you're putting out an RFI, whether you're looking at a new grant program, whether you're just kind of going through that last process of making sure that the community is okay with the thing that you're just about to drop on them. I think, and I have talked about this for a very long time, we need to make the community where they are. We need to understand the actual issues within a community as opposed to presuming what the issues are. I think we need to give better forums for the community to engage and for them to respond and critique the plans that we put together. But I think the really big thing is making sure that we have a long enough engagement process to be able to do that. Starting with the community, starting with the engagement, even before you're going to the procurement. Because if you're not doing this as the first stop, even if you learn something new and miraculous, it's going to be virtually impossible to actually integrate it into any project you're doing. So it really needs to start there. And I think that impetus is entirely on us, entirely on government and the administration to start with that. The communities, especially in the Commonwealth, have worked. Whether setting up task force, whether coming out to night meetings, coming to meetings on Saturdays, the communities, the constituents have done their job. Now we need to do ours and really reimagine how we are approaching community engagement, but mainly how we are timing community engagement.
So noting, I'm just going to ask you one last question, but it's a fun one, but as a preview, there are a lot of questions that we couldn't get to that had to do with funding for highways and other rail lines. And there's so many different things that folks want to talk about. But for the last question, I want to know, keeping all that in mind, if you had the opportunity to address one existing transportation challenge without any financial or staffing restrictions, what would you tackle first?
Bus rapid transit. I just would. I would take an entire corridor. I would take Route 2, I would take 95, 495, 1, Mass Ave. I would take just a whole Excel sheet of places, take the full lane, fully connect an entire region, fully connect multiple municipalities in a pilot project, and run the pilot well. Have the frequency, have a robust community engagement process even before you design the pilot. And really then also think very thoughtfully about the fare system and where you're pricing that. That is the absolute first thing I would do if I had all the money in the world and all the say in the world, and I could just like take the streets wherever I want. That would be it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your service on the council as one of our officers. Thank you for what you're taking on in this new role. We are honored to be able to work with you and to have you advancing these important values for our region.
Thank you. I really appreciate you all taking the time to hear me this morning. Take care.
Take care. And before I turn it back to Adam, earlier in this meeting, when he was busy also working to save us from climate change, I had the privilege of recognizing Martin Pillsbury, 40 years of service, and he has joined us now. And so Martin, because I know you're like Holly, that you don't love being in the spotlight. So you'll just get the abbreviated version of, we are so thankful for your 40 years with MAPC, for all you've done to promote sustainability and resilience, to bring on teams who've worked with you and continued this work, and also to mentor so many of us. And there were so many comments in the chat of not just folks within MAPC, but folks on this council who you have helped along the way. So Martin, thank you for your 40 years. Congratulations on this milestone. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Adam.
Thank you, Catherine. And thanks for leading that Q&A with the Undersecretary. What a truly inspirational keynote speaker. And I'm excited to be part of, and I hope many on the call are excited to be part of working with the state and with the Secretary of Transportation to achieve the lofty but way overdue goals that she highlighted. So thank you for that great segment. So to take phrasing from Sam's report earlier, I think we're about ready to land the plane. I want to thank everybody for their patience today, getting through the business portion of the meeting, getting through the quorum, but I hope the payoff was was a good one in how we closed things out today. So I want to just make a couple notes before we wrap up. One, I'd like to ask everybody to keep an eye out for an invitation to council orientation for newer council members that should be coming out. I want to ask everybody to stay tuned for the annual council meeting, which will be occurring at the end of May, which we hope will be an in-person event. And if there isn't any other additional business, I would ask for a motion to adjourn this winter council meeting. All right, the motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion on the adjournment? Seeing none, one last time, I will ask the ayes to go first in the chat. Anybody opposed to adjourning, please vote now. And any abstentions? All right, seeing none, I call that vote in the affirmative, and this meeting is successfully adjourned. Thank you, everybody.